Hello and welcome to Snoozy Tour, where history becomes a story you can drift away to. Tonight, we're stepping back into the world of early colonial America. Not the polished portraits of powdered wigs and grand declarations, but the everyday lives of ordinary people. The farmers bending under the sun in rocky fields, the women spinning and weaving by firelight, the laughter that echoed through taverns, and the quiet courage that carried families through winters so bitter they seemed endless. This is not just the tale of hardship. It is the story of resilience, humor, and the small human moments that shaped a nation. Over the next chapters, you'll walk in their shoes, hear their songs, feel their struggles, and discover how these early colonists laid the foundation for something extraordinary. So settle in, close your eyes, and let's begin. The day begins long before the sun has fully risen. In colonial America, daylight is a precious resource, and to waste it is to risk survival. You wake in a small wooden house, the walls rough-hewn and chinked with clay to keep out the draft. The air inside is cold and heavy with the smell of smoke that has seeped into every beam and blanket. The hearth, once glowing with last night's embers, has gone dull, and the first task of the morning is to coax a flame back to life. A woman bends near the ashes, blowing gently until a faint orange glow brightens. She adds small sticks of kindling, then larger pieces of wood. Soon, the room fills with a faint crackle of fire, and with it, a small reprieve from the chill. The fireplace is not just a source of warmth, it is the engine of the household. It will bake bread, heat water, cook stew, and dry damp clothes. Without it, life in this house would be impossible. The family stirs slowly. Children rise from straw mattresses, their hair tangled, faces red from the cold. They pull on simple linen shirts and wool stockings, clothes rough against their skin. There is no thought of comfort, only necessity. A boy may be expected to fetch water from the well before breakfast. The bucket, heavy with iron handle, must be carried carefully, for spilling means another trip across frozen ground or muddy yard. A girl, scarcely older than 6, may be tasked with tending to chickens, scattering feed while keeping an eye out for hawks that circle overhead. Every child has a role because every pair of hands matters. Outside, the world is quiet except for the occasional call of a bird or the distant bark of a dog. The settlement is small, perhaps a scattering of houses along a dirt track, a church at the center, and beyond that, forests that seem endless. The land has only recently been carved into fields. Tree stumps dot the soil, reminders of the wilderness that refuses to yield easily to human hands. The earth itself is stubborn. Rocks push up through the frost every spring, demanding to be cleared anew. Survival here is a constant negotiation with nature, and nature rarely compromises. The farmer steps outside with an axe resting on his shoulder. His boots crunch against frost-covered ground. He looks toward the barn where animals wait to be fed. A cow lows impatiently. Milk is not just food, it will become butter and cheese, staples that last long after fresh supplies are gone. He pushes open the barn door, the smell of hay and manure thick in the air, and begins the practiced work of tending to livestock. Chickens cluck and scatter, pigs grunt in their pens, and the cow leans against the stall as if urging him to hurry. Meanwhile, inside the house, breakfast is underway. There is no luxury of bacon and eggs unless the family has slaughtered a pig recently. More often, it is cornmeal mush, cooked thick over the fire and served with a bit of milk if available. Sometimes there is bread left from the last baking day, though bread is precious because the process of grinding flour, heating ovens, and baking is laborious and cannot be done daily. Every meal is plain, every bite calculated to stretch as far as it can. By the time the sun crests the horizon, the household has already been at work for hours. The farmer prepares for the field, where stumps and stones still wait to be conquered. The wife prepares her spinning wheel, knowing the day ahead will be filled with endless rhythm. Draw the fiber, twist the thread, spin the wheel. Children who are too small for heavy labor are given smaller tasks: collecting eggs, gathering firewood, picking stones from the yard. To be idle is to be a burden, and burdens cannot be afforded. But amid the constant labor, there is also a sense of quiet resilience. The colonists, though weary and burdened, are not without pride. They see themselves as builders of something new, carving a society out of raw land. Each day's toil is not only for survival but also for the shaping of a future. As the morning deepens, the settlement comes alive. Smoke rises from chimneys, mingling into a low haze. Neighbors pass by on the dirt track, exchanging quick greetings before setting to their own work. The church bell rings faintly in the distance, not for service, but as a reminder of the community's heartbeat. Beyond the edge of the cleared land, the forest looms dark and endless, a reminder of both danger and opportunity. By mid-morning, backs are already sore, hands rough, and sweat dampens the collar despite the cold. The sun is no longer a gentle glow but a bright overseer, watching every movement in the field. This is the rhythm of life in the colonies. Rise early, labor endlessly, rest briefly, then begin again. And though each day feels repetitive, each day also brings a step toward survival, a chance to see another dawn. Night will bring its own challenges, but for now the colony is awake, alive, and moving forward. One stroke of the hoe, one spin of the wheel, one carried bucket at a time. If dawn is about awakening the household, then the true day begins in the fields. For a colonial farmer, the land itself is both friend and enemy, promising survival but demanding a steep price in labor. To clear it is not the simple act of felling trees, but an ongoing battle against roots, rocks, and the stubborn will of nature. The colonists who first arrived saw forests stretching in every direction, trees so tall and thick that the sun barely touched the ground beneath their canopies. To farm, these forests had to be cut back, but an axe swing is only the beginning. The trees fall with thunderous crashes, their trunks hauled away for firewood or building, yet the ground they leave behind is hardly ready for seed. What remains is a battlefield of jagged stumps, each one anchored by a root system that digs deep into the earth. Removing these roots by hand is nearly impossible with the tools available. Shovels, iron pry bars, and brute strength only scratch the surface. Often, the stumps are left behind like tombstones in a field, reminders of the forest that once stood and the labor that never ends. Farmers plant around them, weaving their rows of corn and beans through a maze of obstacles. As the years pass, the roots slowly rot, softening and giving way, but this is a patience game measured in decades, not days. Until then, every plow catches, every hoe clangs against hidden wood, and every seed must be placed carefully. Then there are the rocks. Colonial fields seem cursed with them. Frost heave each spring pushes stones upward from the earth's depths as if the land itself rejects cultivation. Farmers spend endless hours bent over, lifting stones with aching backs, carrying them to the field edges. There they are piled into walls, stone fences that still crisscross New England today, silent monuments to the back-breaking labor of those who built them. These walls serve double duty, marking property lines and keeping livestock in place, but their real meaning lies in the sheer effort they represent. Each rock tells a story of persistence, of a hand that refused to leave the soil cluttered. A farmer works with simple tools, an axe, a hoe, a wooden plow pulled by oxen if he is fortunate enough to own them. The plow itself is crude compared to modern standards, just a sharpened wooden blade tipped with iron. It breaks the soil, but only shallowly, leaving much of the root work in stone for human hands to manage. The oxen move slowly, straining against their harness, and even then the plow catches and jerks, stopping progress with every hidden obstacle. Patience is as necessary as strength. Sweat beads quickly, even in the cool morning air. The farmer's shirt clings to his back, soaked through before noon. His hands, calloused from years of this work, grip tools worn smooth by use. The rhythm of chopping, prying, and lifting is interrupted only by the groans of exertion and the occasional curse muttered under breath when a rock proves too stubborn to budge. This is not work done in hours. It stretches across seasons, across years, a never-ending process of taming the land inch by inch. Children, too, are part of this labor. Young boys drag smaller stones to the wall, while older ones learn to handle tools under their father's watchful eye. The work is a kind of inheritance, each child trained not through choice but necessity. For girls, the fields may be less familiar, but in times of planting and harvest, every hand is called forward. Colonial survival is an all-family affair. There is no division between labor and life because they are one and the same. Neighbors often help one another, not out of charity but out of shared survival. Clearing a large field may bring together several families, their combined effort turning an impossible task into a merely exhausting one. Jokes are rare, the work is too heavy, but there is camaraderie in sweat, a silent understanding that everyone here shares the same struggle. When the day ends, blisters sting, muscles ache, and the progress seems small. Yet a cleared patch of earth, ready for planting, is victory enough. The forest, however, never stays subdued for long. Saplings creep back at the edges, weeds take root in disturbed soil, and every spring brings another offering of rocks. The colonist learns that this land is never truly conquered. It must be maintained constantly, defended against the relentless march of nature. Still, there is pride in a cleared field. To stand at its edge, looking over rows of turned soil, is to see proof of human will. Where once stood trees and shadows now lies a patch of possibility, where corn might grow tall, beans climb skyward, and squash sprawl across the ground. Each cleared acre is not only a field but a foothold for a family, a statement that they belong here and intend to endure. By the time the sun dips toward its zenith, the farmer wipes his brow and leans on his hoe. His arms tremble with fatigue, his back aches as though pressed by weights, but the sight of open soil brings a satisfaction few modern comforts can match. The land has given way just a little. Enough to plant, enough to hope, enough to believe that tomorrow will bring more. In colonial America, the fight against the wilderness is not won in grand battles but in the daily skirmishes of axe, plow, and sweat. And though the wilderness always presses back, for this moment at least, the farmer stands victorious on his hard-won ground. With the land cleared as best as human hands and stubborn oxen can manage, the next stage of survival begins: planting. In colonial America, this is not a task done casually, but a ritual of precision where every movement of hand and stick determines whether there will be food enough to last through the year. The colonists learn much from the native peoples who have cultivated the land for centuries before them. Among the most enduring lessons is the method of the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash grown together in harmony. It is an ingenious system. Corn provides the stalk, beans climb and fix nitrogen in the soil, squash sprawls along the ground, shading out weeds and keeping the earth moist. Alone, each crop struggles. Together, they thrive. The day of planting begins early. Tools are simple. No iron machines, no carefully calibrated planters, only pointed sticks known as dibbles. Each hole is poked by hand, a few inches deep, spaced with careful calculation. Into each goes a kernel of corn, sometimes 3 or 4, dropped with a prayer that birds will not notice or that rains will not rot them before they sprout. Too shallow and the crows will feast. Too deep and the seed will never push its way to light. The margin between success and failure is no wider than the breadth of a hand. Behind the corn come the beans. Once the corn pushes green shoots into the air, beans are planted nearby, their tendrils ready to climb and entwine. Later still, squash seeds are pressed into the soil between the rows, destined to stretch outward, their broad leaves forming a living carpet. It is a partnership of plants, a strategy of survival that reflects the necessity of cooperation in colonial life itself. The rhythm of planting is hypnotic. Step, poke, drop, cover. Step, poke, drop, cover. The farmer bends and straightens until his back feels like a bow strung too tight. Children, eager but clumsy, follow with baskets of kernels, their small hands spilling as many seeds as they plant. Mothers and daughters trail behind, patting down soil, smoothing the rows. Even the smallest child can carry a gourd of water to dampen the dry earth. The sun rises higher, heat pressing down, sweat soaking linen shirts and trickling into eyes. Dirt gathers under fingernails, grinding into the creases of palms. The air is filled with the earthy smell of freshly turned soil, mixed with the sharp scent of sweat and the occasional caw of a crow watching hungrily from a fence post. Every bird overhead feels like an enemy, every dark speck against the sky a potential thief of tomorrow's harvest. Boys are often tasked with standing guard, slings in hand, stones ready to send crows scattering. This is work that demands patience. The rewards are invisible, buried in the ground, uncertain for weeks to come. Yet each seed planted carries a weight of hope. It is the promise of meals through the winter, of bread baked in hearth ovens, of stews thickened with squash, of beans drying in garrets to be eaten when snow lies thick on the fields. Each careless movement, each misjudged depth, risks hunger. Precision matters more than speed. There is also a spiritual element to the act. For many colonists, the planting season is accompanied by prayers whispered under breath, asking God to bless the soil, the seed, and the season to come. For others, there lingers the influence of native traditions, a recognition of the earth's rhythms and the mystery of life hidden within a seed. Whatever their beliefs, every colonist understands that planting is not only labor but faith. When the work is finally done, rows of earth lie smooth and quiet, indistinguishable from one another. Nothing yet grows, nothing yet feeds. But beneath the surface, change has already begun. Tiny kernels swell with moisture, shells crack, roots seek downward, and fragile shoots push upward toward light. The field, barren yesterday, now holds the secret of life waiting to be revealed. Evening brings exhaustion. Muscles burn from bending, hands ache from gripping tools, and the skin at the back of the neck feels raw from the sun's relentless attention. Yet there is satisfaction too. To look across a planted field is to see more than dirt. It is to see the future, the promise of full granaries, of baskets heavy with corn, of families fed through long winters. As dusk settles, the family gathers by the fire. Supper is plain, perhaps a stew of beans from last year's harvest, a crust of bread, a cup of cider, but it tastes richer knowing that tomorrow holds the hope of abundance. Outside, the fields lie dark and still, the seeds resting in their beds of soil. The colonists know the night may bring threats, prowling animals, sudden storms, or the ever-present risk of blight. Yet they also know that without the risk of planting, there can be no reward of harvest. In colonial America, every spring begins with this act of faith, this careful dance of hand, seed, and soil. It is a reminder that survival is never guaranteed but always fought for, row by row, kernel by kernel, season by season. If planting is an act of faith, then weeding is the punishment that follows. In colonial America, weeds are not merely nuisances. They are thieves stealing the sun, water, and soil that crops so desperately need. Left unchecked, they choke corn before it grows tall, smother beans before they can climb, and creep between the broad leaves of squash until the entire field is a tangled jungle. For a farmer, weeds mean hunger, and so all summer long the battle is waged. The weapon of choice is simple: the hoe. A wooden handle, polished smooth by years of calloused hands, and a flat iron blade sharpened just enough to slice through tender stems. With this tool, a farmer bends into rhythm, chop, step, working row after row under the burning sun. The motion becomes almost hypnotic, the kind of work that quiets the mind even as it wears down the body. The sound of blade against earth, the smell of cut weeds drying in the sun, the heat pressing on shoulders and neck, all of it blends into a harsh kind of music that lasts from morning until evening. Weeding is endless. The colonists quickly learned that weeds grow faster than crops, stronger than crops, and more determined to reclaim the land than any farmer could ever be. A field cleared one week is overrun the next. Entire families take part in the war against them. Fathers swing hoes in long arcs. Mothers stoop low, tugging stubborn roots from the earth with bare hands. Children crawl between rows, pulling at the green invaders while their knees press into the soil. Even the smallest hands find work here. Every dandelion yanked, every thistle uprooted is one less threat to the harvest. The sun makes the labor brutal. By midday, sweat pours freely, dripping into eyes, soaking through linen, leaving salt stains on coarse fabric. Dirt cakes to arms and legs until skin and soil are almost indistinguishable. Feet, shoved into worn leather shoes or sometimes bare, grow tough against the hot ground. Insects swarm, biting ankles and buzzing in ears. There is no glamour in this work, only necessity. Yet within the tedium there are small moments of life. A child laughs when a worm wriggles from the soil. A crow caws from the fence post, daring the farmer to look away so it might snatch a seedling. The family pauses to drink from a wooden bucket of water drawn from the well, passing a single ladle between them. These moments, fleeting as they are, stitch together the otherwise monotonous hours. The weeds themselves become familiar enemies. Lamb's quarters, pigweed, purslane, plants that today might be considered edible or even desirable, are, in the colonial field, rivals to corn and beans. Thistles pierce through thin shoes, nettles sting bare arms, and vines snake their way toward tender stalks. Each has its own strategy, its own stubbornness, and each must be met with the same resolve. Chop, pull, clear, repeat. Sometimes, neighbors join together to tackle large fields, turning the back-breaking work into something closer to a social event. Stories are shared, songs hummed, and the steady rhythm of hoes striking earth becomes almost like drumming. Children chase each other between rows when they should be working, earning stern looks from parents but also smiles from those who remember their own childhood mischief. Even in labor, the community finds ways to endure. The work continues through the hottest days of summer. Clouds of dust rise with each strike of the hoe, coating hair, skin, and clothes in a fine grit. The air hums with cicadas, a constant reminder that the season grows long and the crops must be defended until harvest. At times, the farmer feels as though he is fighting not just weeds, but the land itself, which seems determined to return to wilderness. But persistence matters. Each cleared row allows corn to stretch taller, beans to climb higher, squash to spread wider. Each weed pulled is one less mouth competing for scarce nutrients. Though the work feels endless, though the back aches and the blisters throb, the results slowly appear. Fields remain orderly, crops grow strong, and the promise of harvest becomes more certain. Evening brings relief. The family gathers tools, their bodies aching, their clothes streaked with dirt and sweat. As the sun sets, long shadows stretch across the cleared rows, and for a moment, the land looks orderly, tamed, almost obedient. The weeds will return, they always do, but for now the farmer feels a small victory. At the hearth that night, while supper simmers over the fire, hands are rubbed with animal fat to soothe the cracks and blisters. Stories are told quietly, and sometimes there is laughter, though it is soft and weary. Outside, the night settles over the fields, and in the darkness, weeds are already waiting to rise again. Weeding is the forgotten labor of colonial life, the work that leaves no monument, no record, no legacy. Yet without it, there would be no crops, no food, no survival. In every cleared row lies proof of patience, persistence, and the stubborn will to endure. And so, day after day, season after season, the battle continues as endless as the weeds themselves. If spring is about hope and summer is about endurance, then autumn is the season of reckoning. In colonial America, harvest is not just a time of gathering food, it is the moment when an entire year's survival is measured. Every kernel of corn, every bundle of wheat, every gourd of squash is a safeguard against the cold and hunger that will soon descend. Harvest is work, yes, but it is also celebration, community, and proof that months of labor have not been in vain. The fields, once dotted with stumps and tangled with weeds, now stand heavy with life. Corn stalks rise above the heads of children, their golden tassels rustling in the wind. Squash sprawls across the ground, their broad leaves hiding fat pumpkins and gourds. Wheat, cut to shimmering gold, bends in the breeze like a sea of grain. Everywhere, there is abundance waiting to be gathered, but only if hands are quick, steady, and tireless. Corn is the first great task. Each ear must be plucked by hand, pulled from stalks that cut and scratch at bare arms. The work is repetitive: grasp, twist, pull, drop into a basket. Over and over from sunrise until dusk. Children run ahead, searching for the reddened husks that mark special ears. Sometimes a game, sometimes a tradition that promises good luck or a stolen kiss at a husking bee. Baskets fill quickly, but the field never seems to shrink. And then comes the corn husking itself, which turns drudgery into festivity. Families gather in a neighbor's barn, the floor swept clean, piles of corn stacked high. Men, women, and children sit in a great circle, husking ear after ear, the rhythm of their hands matched by the rhythm of their voices. Stories flow as freely as laughter. Jokes are told, songs are sung, gossip is traded. The work, which would have taken weeks for one family, is finished in days when the community joins together. This is more than labor, it is survival through unity. Grain harvest demands a different skill. The scythe is a tool both graceful and dangerous. A long wooden handle, a curved blade sharp enough to cut through rows of stalks with a single sweep. To wield it properly is an art. The farmer steps forward in rhythm, swinging the blade in smooth arcs, each stroke cutting close to the ground. Too shallow and stalks are left behind. Too deep and the blade bites the earth, dulling its edge. The motion must be constant, steady, efficient. Sweat pours freely as the sun beats down, muscles straining with every swing. Behind the reapers, others gather the fallen stalks into sheaves, tying them with twine and stacking them in shocks to dry. Threshing follows, another rhythm of labor. Inside barns, men take up flails, wooden sticks joined by leather straps, and beat the bundles of grain until kernels fall free. The sound echoes like drums, steady and relentless, as if the barn itself were alive with the heartbeat of survival. Dust fills the air, clinging to sweat-dampened faces and making eyes sting. But each pile of grain that grows on the floor is a treasure beyond gold, because without it, winter means hunger. Winnowing is the final step and the most delicate. On breezy days, women carry baskets of grain outside, tossing them into the air so that chaff blows away while the heavier kernels fall back down. The sight is almost beautiful, golden grains cascading in sunlight, while the wind carries the husks in drifting clouds. Children chase the flying chaff as if it were snow, laughing while mothers scold them not to spill a single kernel. Harvest time is also feast time. When neighbors come to help, food flows freely. Stews made thick with vegetables, bread baked from fresh flour, roasted meat shared in generous portions. Cider presses work constantly, turning apples into the sweet drink that will soon ferment into something stronger. After the day's labor, music fills the night. A fiddle scrapes out a lively tune, boots stamp against the barn floor, and even the most weary find themselves drawn into the dance. For a few hours, the exhaustion is forgotten, replaced by joy in the company of friends and the abundance of the season. But harvest is not without its shadows. Every farmer knows the fear of an early frost that kills crops before they can be gathered, or rains that rot wheat in the fields. Every family has seen years when barns stand half empty, when the winter ahead promises hunger no matter how hard they worked. That is why the community bonds are so vital. To harvest alone is to gamble, to harvest together is to survive. By the time the fields are bare and the barns full, the colony itself feels transformed. There is relief in the sight of stacked sheaves, rows of filled barrels, shelves lined with jars of preserved food. There is pride in muscles sore from honest labor. And there is comfort in knowing that when snow falls and nights grow long, there will be bread to eat, cider to drink, and neighbors to rely on. Harvest in colonial America is more than a season. It is the culmination of faith, labor, and unity. It is proof that against all odds, against rocks, weeds, storms, and hunger, a community can wrest life from the soil. And in that victory they find not just survival, but the beginnings of something greater. A shared identity, a reason to endure, and a glimpse of hope for the future. Once the last ears of corn are husked and the final bundles of grain are stacked in the barn, another race begins, one that is quieter but no less urgent. Harvest might bring abundance, but abundance without preservation is a cruel illusion. In colonial America, there are no refrigerators, no sealed cans, no electric freezers humming in the corner of a kitchen. Food left fresh will spoil within days, sometimes within hours. So every autumn, families turn their attention to preserving what they have gathered, transforming perishable harvests into stores that might last through the long, merciless winter. The first challenge is meat. Animals are slaughtered in autumn, when cooler weather helps prevent rot and when feed supplies grow scarce. Pork is the most common meat, and the colonists have many ways to make it last. Salt pork is prepared by cutting meat into manageable chunks and layering them in barrels with coarse salt. Over time, the salt draws out moisture, leaving meat that is tough, briny, but resistant to bacteria. Done properly, a barrel of salt pork can feed a family for months. Done poorly, it spoils and the waste is catastrophic. Beef and fish receive similar treatment. Salt fish, dried in the sun or packed in brine, becomes a staple in coastal communities. Even those far inland may taste fish carried by traders from the Atlantic, though by the time it reaches them it is as stiff as wood and requires soaking for hours before it is remotely edible. Smokehouses too play their role. These small buildings, dark and pungent, are designed for one purpose: to hang meat over smoldering fires until smoke infuses every fiber. The smoke not only adds flavor but creates chemicals that slow the growth of bacteria. Tending the smokehouse is an art. Too much heat, and the meat cooks instead of cures. Too little, and it spoils before preservation is complete. Families keep a careful watch, day and night, until the work is done. Fruits and vegetables demand a different strategy. Apples are the great treasure of autumn. Some are stored in cool cellars, carefully arranged so that bruised fruit does not spoil the rest. Others are sliced thin and laid out to dry, then packed into cloth bags for winter use. Many are pressed into cider, an operation that turns yards into sticky workshops. Wooden presses creak and groan as strong arms turn handles, crushing apples into golden juice. Left alone, the juice ferments naturally, becoming hard cider that keeps longer and is safer to drink than water from many wells. Even children sip watered-down versions, a common part of daily meals. Squash, pumpkins, and root vegetables, turnips, carrots, parsnips, find safety in root cellars. These underground chambers are dug into hillsides or beneath houses, lined with stone to insulate against frost. Layers of sand or straw keep vegetables from touching one another, slowing decay. Entering a root cellar in the dead of winter is like stepping into a time capsule of autumn. The air is cool and damp, and the smell of earth and vegetables hangs heavy. Pickling is another essential craft. Cucumbers, beans, even eggs can be packed into brine or vinegar, flavored with whatever spices are available. Pickled food provides both variety and necessary nutrition during months when fresh produce is impossible. Sugar, a luxury imported at great expense, is used sparingly to make preserves from berries and fruits. Honey, if available, sweetens and extends their shelf life. Every jar is precious, sealed not with modern lids but with wax or cloth tied tight. The work is constant. In one corner of the yard, a woman might be stirring a great kettle of apples over an open fire, boiling them down into thick apple butter. Nearby, children carry baskets of beans to be strung and hung for drying. Men drag barrels into the cellar, their shoulders straining under the weight of salted meat. The entire household becomes a workshop of preservation, every hand occupied, every hour filled with purpose. Yet even with careful effort, loss is inevitable. A batch of apples might rot unnoticed in the cellar, spreading decay through the pile. A barrel of salt pork may be found spoiled when opened, the smell unbearable, the waste devastating. Mice and insects find their way into stores, undoing weeks of labor in a single night. The colonists learn resilience in these moments. There is no choice but to move on, to salvage what remains and to redouble efforts. By late autumn, the landscape changes. Smokehouses stand empty, their work finished. Cellars are full, shelves lined with jars and crocks, barrels sealed and stacked. It is a sight that brings profound relief. Winter will still be hard, but it will not be faced empty-handed. For a colonial family, this is wealth. Not gold or silver, but food secured against hunger, the promise of survival embodied in salted pork, dried apples and barrels of cider. Preserving the harvest is more than a task. It is an act of defiance against the uncertainty of life in a harsh land. It is a statement that though the wilderness may test, though winter may threaten, families will endure. And when snow lies deep and days are short, every bite of preserved food will carry with it the memory of warm fields, autumn sun, and the labor that made survival possible. In colonial America, survival does not rest on fields and barns alone. Behind every acre of planted corn and every barrel of salted pork is another world of labor, quieter perhaps, but just as essential. This is the work of women whose hands spin, weave, cook, sew, and mend the very fabric of daily life. Without them, the household would quickly collapse. The process begins with raw materials. Linen starts as flax, grown in modest plots. Harvesting flax is grueling. The stalks are pulled from the ground, soaked in water until they rot slightly, a process called retting, and then beaten and combed to separate fibers from woody cores. These fibers, coarse at first, are painstakingly smoothed until they can be spun into thread. Wool follows its own path. Once a year, sheep are sheared, their thick coats removed in heavy, greasy clumps. The wool must then be washed, carded, and sorted before it is ready to spin. Cotton is rare and expensive, arriving mostly through trade. For most colonial women, flax and wool are the everyday staples of textile work. The spinning wheel becomes the heartbeat of the home. Sitting for hours, a woman draws fibers through her fingers, twisting them into continuous threads. The wheel hums, the treadle taps, the spindle whirs. It looks simple, but the skill lies in the subtlety of touch. Pull too hard and the thread breaks. Twist too little and it unravels. A skilled spinner can produce hundreds of yards in a day, though it requires unbroken concentration. Often, women sing while spinning, their voices rising above the wheel's steady rhythm. Songs passed down through generations, carrying memories and stories even as fingers remain busy. From thread comes cloth. The loom dominates a corner of the house, its wooden frame tall and imposing. Setting it up is laborious. Warp threads stretched taut, weft threads passed back and forth, hands and feet working in concert. To weave is to perform a kind of music, the shuttle flying, the beater striking, the cloth slowly growing inch by inch. Hours melt away as patterns emerge, and by the time a length of fabric is finished, weeks of effort have been poured into every inch. But even finished cloth is not the end. Linen must be bleached in sunlight, dampened and spread again and again until its fibers whiten. Wool is fulled, washed, beaten, and thickened, until it becomes warmer and denser. Only then can cloth be cut and sewn into garments. Every stitch is done by hand. A single shirt might take weeks to complete, Each seem tight and strong enough to endure years of wear. Needles, rare and precious, are guarded like treasures. Thread, spun from the same fibers as the cloth, is measured carefully. There is no room for waste. Beyond textiles, women bear the endless duties of food preparation. Every meal begins and ends with the fire. Heavy iron pots hang from hooks, stews simmer slowly, bread bakes in brick ovens heated by hours of flames. To manage a fire is a science and an art. Too hot and food burns. Too cool and bread fails to rise. Burns are common, scars across arms and hands a silent testimony to daily risk. Yet meals appear with remarkable regularity, sustaining families through labor. Laundry too is women's work, though to call it washing might be generous. Large kettles are filled with water, heated over open flames. Clothes are scrubbed on rough boards with harsh lye soap, then rinsed in cold water and wrung out by hand. Arms ache, backs throb, skin cracks from constant exposure. Lines of clothing flap in the breeze, a visible sign of effort that few outside the household notice. Child-rearing is woven through all of this. Babies are kept close, carried on hips while mothers spin or cook. Toddlers play at their mother's feet, imitating with toy looms or tiny pots. Older children are folded into chores, learning skills they will one day need to manage their own households. For girls, the training is relentless. A future wife and mother must know how to weave, sew, cook, and preserve or risk her family's survival. For boys, the lessons are different, fields and trade, but the mother's influence shapes them all the same. The burden is enormous. There are no days off, no hours of leisure except perhaps a few moments by firelight when stories are told. Yet within this endless cycle lies creativity and pride. A well-spun thread, a carefully woven quilt, a loaf of bread baked to perfection. These are quiet triumphs, victories that mark a woman's skill and devotion. And though history often forgets them, colonial women are the architects of continuity. While men labor in fields or workshops, it is women who clothe the family, feed them, heal them, and keep the household intact. Their work may not raise barns or fell forests, but without it, no farm would endure, no colony would thrive. As dusk falls, the spinning wheel still hums, the loom still creaks, the fire still burns. A woman's day does not end with sunset. It ends only when her body finally yields to exhaustion. Yet tomorrow she will rise again, tending threads, tending food, tending family, quietly weaving the survival of an entire world. If the field is the heart of survival, the fire is its stomach. In colonial America, cooking is not just a domestic chore but a daily battle against heat, smoke, and unpredictability. Every meal must be prepared over open flames, using tools that modern eyes might mistake for torture devices. Heavy iron pots, long-handled hooks, wooden paddles, and spits turned by hand. There are no knobs to adjust, no timers to remind the cook. The fire itself is the master, and it must be courted, coaxed, and tamed, or it will ruin everything. The day begins at the hearth. Embers from the night before are carefully revived, blown into life with gentle breath or coaxed with scraps of kindling. Once flames catch, logs are added slowly, built into a blaze that will fuel the day's cooking. The hearth is vast compared to a modern fireplace, wide enough to accommodate several pots at once, with iron bars across its mouth and hooks of varying lengths to adjust how close each pot sits to the flames. The entire household depends on its heat, not only for food but for warmth, hot water, and light. Meals are simple, but they demand constant vigilance. A pot of cornmeal mush might bubble over if left unattended, coating the hearth in sticky paste. Stews must be stirred endlessly to keep from scorching on the bottom of iron kettles. Bread requires a special ritual. First, a roaring fire is built inside the brick or stone oven, heating its walls until they glow faintly. Then the fire is scraped out, leaving only residual heat. Loaves are slid inside with a long wooden paddle, and the door sealed with clay or a heavy iron plate. Timing is everything. Too soon and the oven is too hot, burning the crust to ash. Too late and the oven is too cool, leaving loaves pale and undercooked. Families often coordinate with neighbors, baking in shifts so that several households can make use of the same precious heat. Roasting meat is another trial. A joint of pork or venison is skewered on a spit, turned slowly by hand over the fire. Someone, often a child, must sit near the hearth for hours, cranking the spit with mechanical regularity. If he slows or grows distracted, one side burns while the other remains raw. The job is hot, boring, and often rewarded with nothing more than blistered cheeks and sooty clothes. Yet it must be done because a wasted roast is a tragedy few families can afford. Frying is rare not because colonists dislike it, but because fat is too precious to waste. Butter, lard, and oil are carefully hoarded, used only in small amounts for baking or preserving. Most meals are boiled, baked, or roasted. The diet leans heavily on corn, beans, squash, bread, and whatever meat can be caught, hunted, or preserved. Fresh vegetables appear in season, but for much of the year, pickled, salted, or dried foods dominate the table. Dangers lurk at every stage. Sparks leap from the fire, singeing skirts and sleeves. Kettles tip unexpectedly, spilling scalding stew across bare feet. Burns are so common they are almost expected, and in an age without antibiotics, a serious burn can become a death sentence. Women, who bear the brunt of cooking, carry scars across arms and hands, silent witnesses to years of close encounters with fire. Even smoke poses a hazard, filling eyes and lungs until coughing is as much a part of kitchen life as chopping onions. Yet cooking is also a place of creativity. Spices are rare and expensive, imported from across oceans, but herbs grown in kitchen gardens add flavor. Sage, thyme, parsley. Families develop recipes from what they have, turning scarcity into invention. A stew thickened with pumpkin, a bread flavored with molasses, a pudding sweetened with dried apples. Each dish carries the signature of the cook's hand. Meals may be simple, but they are infused with resourcefulness. Cooking is never solitary. Children dart in and out, carrying wood, fetching water, turning spits. Older daughters learn by watching their mothers, imitating movements, memorizing recipes without written instructions. Men may butcher animals or tend smokehouses, but the daily hearth belongs to women and girls. It is their domain, their burden, and their pride. A well-prepared meal is not just nourishment but proof of skill and dedication. Evening meals are the heart of family life. After hours in fields and workshops, the household gathers around wooden tables or simple benches, bowls of stew or platters of bread set before them. Food is shared, conversation flows, and for a brief time the weight of survival eases. Whatever hardships the day brought, the meal affirms one thing: the family has endured another day together. By the time the fire burns low and the last pot is scrubbed with sand and water, the cook is exhausted. Her back aches, her hands are raw, and her eyes sting from smoke. Yet tomorrow she will rise before dawn and begin again, because the fire never rests, and neither can she. Cooking by fire in colonial America is a paradox. Dangerous yet essential, exhausting yet creative, ordinary yet life-defining. Every scar, every soot-stained wall, every loaf of bread pulled from a glowing oven tells the same story, that survival is forged not only in fields and barns but also in the quiet, smoky heat of the hearth. In colonial America, water is never taken for granted. Every drop that steams in a kettle, every ladle poured into a stew, every splash used to scrub clothes or wash a child's face begins with the same exhausting ritual: hauling it, bucket by bucket, from the nearest well, spring, or stream. Unlike modern taps that flow endlessly at the turn of a handle, water in the colonies must be earned with sweat and aching shoulders. Fetching water is a chore that begins at dawn and repeats throughout the day. Wooden or iron-handled buckets are heavy even when empty, but once filled, they become burdens that cut into hands and strain backs. A woman or child may walk 100 yards or more to the well, lower the rope hand over hand, hear the satisfying splash, then strain to haul the bucket up, water sloshing dangerously with every step. In summer, the sun makes the journey sweltering. In winter, the ground is icy, the wind bitter, and sometimes the surface of the well must be broken with an axe before water can be drawn. There is no escaping the need. Without water, meals cannot be cooked, clothes cannot be washed, bodies cannot be cleaned. And laundry, that dreaded endless task, turns the burden of water into something closer to torment. Washing clothes in colonial America is not a daily routine of tossing garments into a machine. It is an ordeal that consumes entire days, leaving women bone-tired and sore. The process begins with heating water, which means splitting wood, carrying logs, and tending flames until kettles boil. Into the steaming water go harsh soaps made from lye and animal fat, substances so caustic they crack the skin and leave hands raw. Clothes are soaked, scrubbed against wooden washboards or flat rocks, then beaten and wrung out by hand. Heavy garments cling like lead, refusing to release water no matter how tightly they are twisted. Rinsing requires even more buckets fetched, carried, and poured. Finally, the dripping clothes are hauled outside and spread across lines or bushes to dry, flapping in the wind like flags of survival. It is hard, filthy work. The steam from boiling kettles mingles with sweat, soaking hair and clothes until the washer is drenched through. The soap stings cuts and blisters. The smell of wet wool and soiled linen fills the air. Backs ache from bending, arms tremble from pounding and scrubbing, and by the end of the day fingers are pruned and bleeding. And when the work is finally done, there is no sense of lasting relief, because by next week or even sooner, it must all be done again. Yet laundry is more than a chore, it is also a community ritual. Women often gather to share the burden, pooling resources and laughter along with water and soap. Together they scrub and rinse, gossiping about neighbors, sharing news, or singing to lighten the drudgery. In these moments, laundry becomes less of a solitary punishment and more of a social event, one of the few opportunities women have to speak freely outside the confines of their homes. Children play nearby, splashing in basins or tumbling in the grass, their laughter mingling with the rhythmic slap of wet cloth. Despite the hardship, clean clothes are a mark of pride. A shirt washed white against all odds, a gown smelling faintly of soap and wind, a child's stockings patched and scrubbed. These are victories that speak of care and dignity. In a world where dirt and sweat are constant companions, the act of washing is not only about hygiene but about asserting humanity against the grime of survival. The water itself shapes daily rhythm. In kitchens, buckets stand ready for cooking, cleaning, and drinking. In barns, troughs must be filled for livestock, each gulp of a cow or pig silently counting against the family's reserves. In households blessed with springs close at hand, life is marginally easier. For those forced to walk long distances, water becomes a daily tax on time and energy. Winter magnifies the struggle. Carrying buckets through snowdrifts leaves legs numb, hands frozen to iron handles. Water spills, turning paths into sheets of ice. Boiling is necessary not only for laundry or cooking but for melting snow when wells freeze solid. Summer brings its own misery. Buckets grow heavier with sweat-soaked hands, streams dry to trickles, and every trip feels longer under the glare of the sun. Even bathing is rare, reserved for necessity rather than comfort. Heating enough water for a full bath is a monumental task, requiring hours of labor. More often, washing consists of sponging faces and hands, with the rest left to endure. The colonists may be criticized by modern standards, but in their world, water is too precious to waste on luxury. By evening, when the last buckets are filled and the final garments are hung, the weight of the day settles on tired shoulders. Arms ache, muscles throb, and hands sting from soap and cold. Yet there is satisfaction too. Clean clothes flutter on lines, fresh water steams in kettles, and the household is ready for another day. In colonial America, water and laundry are not background chores but central battles in the war for survival. Every bucket hauled, every garment scrubbed, every blistered hand tells the same story, that even the most ordinary tasks demand extraordinary effort. And though the work seems endless, the results, fresh bread cooked, clean clothes worn, thirst quenched, make the hardship bearable. For the colonists, water is life, but it is also labor. And laundry, dreaded though it is, becomes proof of resilience, evidence that no matter how hard the land, the family will rise each morning, carry their buckets, scrub their clothes, and endure once more. In colonial America, children are not shielded from the daily grind. From the moment they can walk without tumbling every 3 steps, they are folded into the rhythm of labor. Yet, even in a world of endless chores and strict survival, children find ways to laugh, to play, and to transform drudgery into adventure. It is here, among the small hands and mischievous minds of the young, that the colonies reveal their softer, funnier side. Chores begin early. A boy of 6 may be sent into the fields with a basket to pick stones, his tiny arms straining as he drags rocks almost as big as himself to the edge of the field. Each rock he drops with a dramatic grunt earns a proud nod from his father, or at least, a muttered "good enough" as the man keeps swinging his hoe. Girls of the same age fetch eggs from hen houses, learning quickly to dodge pecks from temperamental hens. More than one colonial girl discovers that running fast is just as important as collecting breakfast. Older children take on bigger responsibilities. Boys guide oxen slowly across fields, pretending they are mighty generals commanding armies. Girls stir pots at the hearth, watching stew bubble like a magical cauldron. There is little time for idleness. Every task has its place. Yet children remain children. They invent games in the midst of labor. A row of weeds to pull becomes a race. Who can fill a basket first? A bucket of water carried from the well becomes a challenge to spill the least, though sometimes the game ends with both children drenched and a scolding from their mother. Education, for those who receive it, is often wedged between chores. A child may copy letters on a slate in the morning, then spend the afternoon chopping wood. In dame schools, children of all ages cram into a parlor, learning their letters while the smell of stew simmers in the kitchen. The lessons are serious, but mischief is never far away. A boy might poke his neighbor with a quill when the dame's back is turned. A girl might smother a laugh when her friend mispronounces psalm and earns a stern glare. Even in the strictest environments, childhood finds cracks to slip through. Play too has its place, though it often blurs with training for adulthood. Wooden hoops are rolled along roads with sticks, the children chasing after them until they collapse in a heap of giggles. Dolls carved from scraps of wood or rags allow girls to practice the roles they are expected to one day fill. Cooking, sewing, rocking babies. Boys carve whistles from willow branches or chase each other with makeshift wooden swords, their shouts echoing through the settlement as they imagine themselves defenders of the colony. Parents may sigh at the noise, but secretly they see the value. Their children are learning strength, coordination, and courage, even if they are also learning how to annoy their elders. Sometimes play comes from the very tools of work. A stick used to poke planting holes becomes a javelin in a child's hand. A pile of grain waiting to be threshed becomes a mountain to climb. Even the endless stone walls built from field rocks become balance beams for daring games. Mothers shout warnings from doorways, reminding children that broken bones are not easily fixed, but the children leap anyway. Colonial life may be full of hardship, but it has no shortage of adventure for those small enough to see the world as playground. Humor seeps in through family interactions. Fathers grumble about lazy sons, only to find the boys inventing clever shortcuts for chores that actually work. Mothers roll their eyes at daughters who stitch crooked seams, then secretly save the lopsided first attempts as keepsakes. Younger siblings become experts at slipping away just as chores are assigned, hiding under tables or behind woodpiles until the coast is clear. The punishment for such antics might be stern words, but more often than not, parents chuckle once backs are turned. After all, they remember their own childhood tricks. Evenings reveal the best of children's humor. Around the hearth, after supper, little ones perform silly dances, or tell stories with exaggerated gestures that leave the family laughing. A boy may puff out his chest, imitating the local minister's booming sermon. A girl may exaggerate her mother's scolding voice, earning both gasps and stifled giggles. These moments remind everyone that laughter is as vital as bread, a way to lighten the weight of endless labor. Colonial children grow quickly into the responsibilities of adulthood, but their capacity for joy, play, and mischief gives the settlement its spark. Their laughter floats over fields and into kitchens, their games transform chores into challenges, and their small rebellions add warmth to the strict order of colonial life. Without them, the colonies would be quieter, perhaps more efficient, but infinitely duller. And so, as the sun sets and children tumble into straw beds, still giggling at jokes whispered under blankets, the colony rests not only on the shoulders of weary men and women but also on the boundless energy of its youngest members. Their hands may be small, but their laughter is mighty, reminding all that even in the harshest times, life is meant not just to be endured but enjoyed. In colonial America, education is a privilege, not a guarantee. Where a child is born, whether to a wealthy merchant, a middling craftsman, or a struggling farmer, determines not only the food on their plate but also the words in their mouth and the numbers in their head. Schools exist, but they are far from universal. For many children, the only lessons come from the land itself, the Bible, or a parent with just enough literacy to scratch their name. For the wealthy, learning is a badge of honor. Sons of the gentry are often sent to formal schools or taught by private tutors in Latin, Greek, mathematics, and classical literature. Their lessons are meant not simply to make them useful, but to prepare them for college, Harvard in Massachusetts, or the College of William and Mary in Virginia. A boy drilled in Cicero and Euclid is expected to become a leader, not a laborer. Daughters of the wealthy receive less formal schooling, but they learn enough reading, writing, and needlework to manage a household with grace. And if they can read poetry aloud at the parlor without stumbling, all the better. For the middle class, the shopkeepers, craftsmen, and small farmers, education is more practical. Many children attend dame schools, informal lessons run by women in their kitchens or parlors. Here, children sit elbow to elbow, squirming on wooden benches while the schoolmistress, often a widow in need of income, teaches them to spell, to add and subtract, and above all, to read the Bible. The smell of stew cooking in the next room drifts into the air, and sometimes the lessons are punctuated by the hiss of a kettle boiling over. A child may spend as much time daydreaming about dinner as about arithmetic. At these schools, humor sneaks in despite the stern setting. One boy smudges ink across his forehead while trying to dip his quill. A girl mispronounces righteousness in such a way that the entire class erupts in stifled giggles until the dame raps her stick on the table. Children carve doodles into their slates when they think no one is looking. Small birds, crooked houses, or caricatures of the very teacher scolding them. Education may be serious business, but children are endlessly inventive at making it less so. For the poor, formal education is rare. A farmer's son may never see the inside of a schoolroom, his lessons learned instead in the field with hoe and plow. A daughter may learn only enough letters to recognize her family's name in the Bible before being set to tasks in the kitchen and garden. Literacy is not dismissed entirely. Many parents teach their children to read passages of Scripture, but reading is often the ceiling, not the floor. Writing is harder still, as paper is precious and ink expensive. A child may trace letters in the dirt with a stick or scratch them onto scraps of bark, only to have the wind scatter their work before the lesson is finished. Books themselves are treasures. In many households, the Bible is the only volume available, and it becomes both schoolbook and moral compass. Children memorize verses until they can recite them in their sleep. Wealthier families may own imported texts of history or poetry, but these are rare luxuries, carefully wrapped to protect them from smoke and damp. A single book might be read aloud to the entire family over months, its pages worn thin from use. Even for those who never see a classroom, life has a way of teaching. The blacksmith's apprentice learns to judge iron's heat by its color, a lesson no arithmetic book could match. A girl in the kitchen learns fractions by having recipes and doubling stews. Survival requires its own curriculum, written not in ink but in sweat and experience. Still, the disparity is clear. A wealthy boy may debate philosophy in polished English, while a poor boy of the same age struggles to scratch his initials into the dirt. Education becomes one more marker of social class, another wall between rich and poor. Yet, in a twist of history, it is often the rough, practical knowledge of the unlettered, the ability to plant, to mend, to endure, that proves most valuable when life turns harsh. And sometimes ignorance carries its own humor. A child who cannot read Psalm might pronounce it with the P loud and proud, to the suppressed laughter of his peers. Another, copying letters from a worn primer, inverts them, creating a row of backwards words that no one but himself can decipher. Parents, exhausted from the day's work, may look over these clumsy attempts with both exasperation and pride. After all, mistakes are proof of trying. In the colonies, education is a patchwork. Some children grow up quoting Cicero, others grow up never holding a book. Some sit in kitchens with slates, others in fields with hoes. But whether through Latin recitations, Bible verses, or lessons learned from dirt and fire, every child is schooled by the colony itself. And even those who never learn to write their names still learn to survive, an education as vital as any classroom could provide. Colonial America is often remembered as a land of opportunity, but opportunity depends heavily on where you stand in society. Life here is divided sharply between classes: the wealthy gentry, the middling sort, and the poor who scrape by day after day. These differences are visible not just in wealth or land, but in clothes, houses, food, and even posture, because when you're hauling buckets all day, you stand differently than someone who has servants to haul them for you. At the top are the gentry, those wealthy enough to own large estates or plantations. Their mornings begin not with an aching back over a hoe, but in feather beds with linen sheets. A servant, perhaps indentured, perhaps enslaved, brings water for washing. Clothes are tailored, wigs powdered, and shoes buckled with silver. Meals are elaborate by colonial standards. Wheat bread instead of coarse cornmeal, tea imported from China, sugar from the Caribbean, coffee steaming in porcelain cups. A wealthy man might grumble about the quality of his imported Madeira wine, while his neighbor struggles to drink water that doesn't taste faintly of mud. Yet even for the gentry, life has its inconveniences. Their houses may boast multiple rooms, libraries, and polished furniture, but they are still lit by candles and warmed by fireplaces that never quite chase away the winter chill. Imagine a grand parlor filled with silk gowns and powdered wigs, and then remember that everyone inside is still bundled against the draft. A visiting European aristocrat might find it all a bit rustic, though he would surely keep those opinions quiet while sipping the very expensive tea. The middling class, the blacksmiths, carpenters, merchants, and skilled farmers, live somewhere in between. Their homes are sturdier than the one-room cabins of the poor but lack the grandeur of the gentry's estates. Food is plain but adequate: bread, stews, cider, perhaps meat if trade or hunting has been kind. Their clothes are sturdy, made from homespun wool or linen, well-fitting but practical. A blacksmith might laugh at the delicate ruffles of a gentleman's shirt while hammering out the nails that gentleman's house requires. Pride for the middling class lies in skill. A craftsman's work is his reputation, and a poorly made chair or crooked shoe would be more shameful than a patch on his breeches. Humor often comes from the contrast between these groups. A farmer, sweating over a rocky field, might grumble that a rich man wouldn't know a hoe from a poker. The gentry, sipping tea, might reply that the farmer's muddy boots would never survive the polished floors of a proper house. And the middling sort, caught in between, could roll their eyes at both, scoffing at the farmer's ignorance while secretly resenting the gentry's silk stockings. Colonial society, in other words, is as full of quiet jokes and subtle rivalries as any modern neighborhood. At the bottom are the poor, laborers, indentured servants, and families struggling on marginal land. Their houses are one-room cabins with dirt floors, their diets a steady repetition of corn mush and whatever scraps they can grow, hunt, or barter. Clothes are patched until patches hold patches together, and shoes, if they exist at all, are worn until toes peek through. Work is endless, pay is scarce, and the line between survival and starvation is dangerously thin. And then, of course, there are those with no freedom at all. Enslaved people whose lives are defined by labor and control, their presence a dark reality of the colonial economy. Their work sustains much of the wealth of the gentry, yet they themselves endure harsh conditions, stripped of the privileges even poor colonists cling to. It is a class divide so profound it cannot be bridged by laughter, though the enslaved carve out moments of humanity and resilience in ways the wealthy cannot comprehend. Colonial society is not as rigid as Europe's aristocracies, but it is still far from equal. A farmer's son may dream of becoming a lawyer or merchant, but without education and opportunity, he is far more likely to inherit his father's calloused hands. A merchant's daughter may marry into wealth, but only if her dowry is large enough and her manners refined. Stories circulate of lucky breaks: an indentured servant who completes his term and builds a thriving farm, or a poor craftsman whose skill wins him wealthy clients. But these are exceptions, not the rule. For most, the class they are born into is the class they remain in. And yet, colonial Americans find ways to laugh at their differences. A tavern might host both a wealthy merchant and a poor farmer, each drinking the same rough cider. After a few mugs, the distinctions blur, and jokes fly about wig powder, muddy boots, and who truly knows the meaning of hard work. For a moment, class lines soften, until the next morning when the merchant counts his coins and the farmer counts his blisters. The colonies may dream of equality, but the reality is a patchwork of privilege and hardship. What unites them all is necessity. Whether sipping tea in a fine parlor or gnawing on coarse bread in a smoky cabin, everyone must still light their fires, fetch their water, and endure the long winters. And perhaps, in that shared struggle, lies the seed of something greater. A society that one day will question why class divides should matter at all. Not every colonial American wakes to roosters crowing over rocky fields. In the cities, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Charleston, life follows a different rhythm, one of noise, heat, and constant motion. Here, the cobblestone streets rattle with cart wheels, echo with church bells, and buzz with vendors hawking their wares in voices so loud they could drown out a preacher. If the countryside is defined by silence broken only by the scrape of a hoe, the city is a chorus that never really stops. The blacksmith's forge is one of the loudest players in this symphony. Step inside and the heat hits like a wave. The fire roars as the bellows pump, and iron glows white-hot on the anvil. Hammer strikes ring out with a rhythm so steady that neighbors joke it's as dependable as the town clock. Sparks fly, smoke curls, and the blacksmith himself, sweaty, soot-streaked, and half-deaf from his own hammer, shapes horseshoes, nails, and tools that keep the city alive. Apprentices scramble to keep pace, pumping the bellows, fetching tools, and occasionally dropping things at the worst possible moment. A blacksmith may grumble about clumsy helpers, but he remembers being one himself, once burning his sleeve clean through while trying to look professional. Carpenters and cabinet makers add their own music: the rasp of saws, the thump of hammers, the scratch of planes shaving curls of wood. Their workshops smell of sawdust and pine, their benches cluttered with chisels that always seem to vanish when needed most. Customers poke their heads in, asking for repairs or custom pieces, sometimes offering more advice than payment. A carpenter learns to smile politely while thinking, if you know so much about chair legs, why don't you build it yourself? The marketplace is another theater of city life. Stalls spill into the streets, each one competing for attention. Fishmongers shout about the freshness of their catch, though the smell sometimes suggests otherwise. Bakers advertise steaming loaves, their scent drifting temptingly through the air. Children dart between booths, hoping for a free apple or a dropped crust. Housewives haggle with practiced skill, squeezing turnips and wagging fingers until a poor merchant finally surrenders a better price. For every sale there is laughter, argument, or both. Taverns, meanwhile, are the true heartbeat of the city. By day, they serve as gathering places where news and gossip flow faster than the ale. By night, they become louder, livelier, and, depending on the crowd, less polite. Pipe smoke clouds the air, fiddles scrape out tunes, and mugs slam against tables with a force that suggests both joy and frustration. A traveling merchant brags about his wares, a sailor spins wild tales of storms at sea, and a local farmer insists, louder with every cup, that his cider could outshine anything imported from England. Sometimes the debates get heated, but more often they dissolve into laughter, the universal glue of a tavern night. Humor thrives in city life because the chaos leaves so many opportunities. A cart overturns in the street, spilling apples everywhere, and children chase them like treasure while the poor driver groans. A new apprentice, eager to impress, pounds nails into the wrong side of a board, earning both scolding and smirks. A preacher railing against sin might find his voice drowned out by the clang of a blacksmith next door, or worse, by hecklers who slip out of the tavern mid-sermon. Of course, cities have their darker sides. The noise can be overwhelming, the smell unbearable in summer when waste mixes with heat in livestock. Streets flood with rain, turning to rivers of mud where carts sink to their axles. Fire is a constant danger, one stray spark capable of wiping out entire blocks of wooden houses. And disease spreads more easily in crowded quarters, where wells may be contaminated and close living makes coughs everyone's business. Yet despite these risks, city dwellers find comfort in the closeness of others. Goods are easier to buy than to make. Taverns keep spirits alive. Churches stand tall at the center, their bells marking the hours and reminding all that community, for better or worse, binds them together. Where a farmer may work in solitude, city life insists on neighbors, sometimes too close for comfort but always present. For the tradesman, pride comes not from acres of land but from skill. A blacksmith who shapes a perfect horseshoe, a carpenter whose table stands sturdy, a baker whose bread sells out by noon. These victories mean as much in the city as a bountiful harvest does in the countryside. Their humor often masks their exhaustion, but their laughter, shared over mugs of cider or shouted across noisy workshops, keeps the city from collapsing under its own weight. In the end, colonial cities are messy, noisy, and unpredictable. But they are also vibrant, alive with energy, and bursting with stories. Every clang of a hammer, every joke in a tavern, every haggle in the market adds to the rhythm of urban colonial life. And while farmers in the countryside may shake their heads at the chaos, city folk laugh, shrug, and get on with it, because in the city, there's always another cart to push, another loaf to bake, another joke to tell. In colonial America, Sunday is not a day of leisure, it is an obligation. The Sabbath belongs to God, and attendance at church is not optional. Even the most exhausted farmer, even the mother with aching hands from spinning, even the child who would rather chase chickens than sit still, all of them march to the meeting house when the bell rings. To skip service is to invite gossip at best and punishment at worst. In New England, some communities fine families who fail to show. The meeting house itself is often the largest and most important building in town. Simple in design, square or rectangular, its whitewashed walls stand stark against the fields and forests. Inside, the room is cold in winter and stifling in summer, for there is no insulation, no stove, no luxury to soften the experience. Wooden benches serve as pews, and they are as unforgiving as the sermons that thunder from the pulpit. Children fidget, legs swinging, while parents hiss reminders to sit still. Falling asleep is dangerous, not because the minister will notice but because the tithingman might. This official carries a staff tipped with a brass knob on one end and a foxtail on the other. With the knob, he pokes drowsy men awake. With the tail, he tickles women or children caught nodding off. It is a job that seems to combine both discipline and comedy. The sermon is the centerpiece of the day. Ministers speak for an hour, often two, their voices echoing off bare walls. The subjects are heavy: sin, salvation, the eternal struggle of good versus evil. Words like damnation and redemption roll through the air with equal weight. Fear is a tool as much as faith. Congregants are reminded that their souls hang by a thread over the fires of hell, and only constant vigilance will save them. A boy whispers to his sister that he can smell the brimstone already, and she stifles a laugh until her mother's stern glare silences her. Despite the severity, church is more than religion, it is the glue of community. After the service, the churchyard becomes a marketplace of conversation. Neighbors exchange news of births and deaths, discuss the health of crops, and arrange marriages with the same seriousness as they discuss theology. Young men linger, hoping to catch the eye of young women, who pretend not to notice but blush anyway. Children dart between gravestones, playing games until they are shooed away. Business deals are struck here, alliances formed, and sometimes grudges born. Humor seeps in even here. A farmer might mutter that the minister's sermon was longer than his field rows, and his wife hushes him with a smile. Children trade stories about who got the sharp end of the tithingman's stick this week. Someone jokes that the benches must have been designed by the devil himself, so hard are they on the back. And though the laughter is quiet, it is real, proof that even in the sternest environments, humanity cannot be entirely subdued. Clothing on Sunday is another spectacle. Families wear their best, though best is a relative term. A wealthy merchant arrives in imported silk waistcoat and powdered wig, while a farmer wears the same homespun jacket he patched 3 times last month. Mothers smooth children's hair, scrub faces, and adjust collars, though by the time the family trudges home through dust or mud, everyone looks as disheveled as when they left. Still, appearances matter. A torn sleeve or dirty stocking invites whispers. Colonial society may forgive a missed harvest, but it rarely forgives poor presentation in the meeting house. For women, church offers one of the few chances to socialize outside the household. They share recipes, herbal remedies, and news whispered between hymns. For men, it is a time to compare notes on politics and weather, both equally unpredictable. And for children, despite the endless sermons, it is a chance to see friends, trade small treasures, and test how far they can push fidgeting before attracting the tithingman's staff. By afternoon, when the service finally ends, families return home. The rest of the day remains quiet, for the Sabbath is meant for rest and reflection. Work is avoided, games are muted, and meals are simpler than usual. Yet there is also a sense of relief. The duty has been met, the community affirmed, and the Sabbath observed. For all its discomforts, church offers a rhythm, a reminder that life in the colonies is not only about survival but about belonging to something larger than oneself. As evening falls, the meeting house stands empty again, its benches silent, its pulpit waiting. Smoke rises from chimneys, families gather around hearths, and the colony settles into another night. Tomorrow the axes and hoes will come out again, the fire will roar, and labor will resume. But today, for a few hours, the colony has been united, restless children, weary farmers, stern ministers, and gossiping neighbors all bound together in the strange, stern, and sometimes humorous ritual of Sunday in the meeting house. For the colonists, religion is not something practiced once a week in the meeting house. it is the constant backdrop of life. Faith shapes every choice, from the food on the table to the words spoken in a child's ear. Hard work, suffering, and perseverance are not just practical necessities, they are framed as divine obligations. To labor from dawn to dusk is to honor God. To endure hardship without complaint is to prove one's character. And to prosper, well, perhaps that means God is smiling on you. This mindset becomes known as the Puritan ethic, and it seeps into the fabric of colonial society. A broken plow is not just an inconvenience, it might be a test of patience. A successful harvest is not simply luck with weather, it is a reward for piety. Even illness can be seen as a lesson sent from heaven, though some colonists, coughing miserably through fevers, likely thought the Almighty was being a little too enthusiastic with his lessons. Daily routines are filled with reminders of faith. Families begin mornings with prayer, thanking God for the chance to rise again. Meals are preceded by blessings. Even bedtime is marked with whispered words of gratitude and pleas for protection through the night. For children, these rituals can feel endless. A boy wiggles impatiently while his father prays before supper, sneaking bites of bread when he thinks no one is looking. A girl stifles yawns during evening prayers, only to have her mother's sharp glance remind her that God sees everything, including poorly hidden yawns. Religious belief also governs leisure, or more accurately, the lack of it. Dancing, card games, and frivolous entertainment are frowned upon in many communities, especially in Puritan New England. To laugh too loudly, to sing too merrily, or to linger too long in idleness is to flirt with sin. Yet colonists are still human. A fiddle tune at a barn raising, a hearty laugh at a tavern, or a whispered joke during chores slips through the cracks of strict rules. One imagines God himself might have smiled at such moments, though ministers would not admit it. The Bible is the central book, the anchor of all learning and morality. It is the first text many children read, its verses memorized and recited with precision. Ministers thunder its passages from pulpits, and families use it as a guide in disputes, quoting lines to support their arguments. Some colonists grow so familiar with its words that they wield them in jest. A neighbor might scold another with, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's ox," when the real complaint is about borrowing tools without returning them. Such humor does not erase the seriousness of Scripture but reveals how deeply it permeates everyday speech. Religion also dictates community behavior. Work is not just for oneself but for the good of the whole. When a barn needs raising, the men gather without question, their labor framed as both neighborly duty and godly service. Women hold quilting bees with the same mindset, stitching fabric while stitching community bonds. To shirk such responsibilities is to risk both social judgment and divine disapproval. If someone consistently avoids helping, the whispers begin, "Is he lazy?" Or worse, ungodly? This intertwining of faith and community can be both comforting and oppressive. For some, it creates a sense of belonging, a reassurance that life has meaning and suffering has purpose. For others, it feels like an endless measuring stick, every action weighed against invisible scales. A farmer who works from sunrise until stars appear may still wonder if his effort is enough in God's eyes. A mother who loses a child may hear it explained as part of God's mysterious plan, though in her heart she longs for answers that sermons cannot provide. Yet humor finds its way here too. Colonists joke, quietly of course, that the minister's sermons are so long because he is practicing patience on the congregation, or that suffering builds character, though some mutter that they have enough character to last several lifetimes. Such small rebellions do not challenge the foundation of belief but allow weary people to breathe within its confines. Religion also provides hope. In a world of disease, hard winters, and uncertain harvests, the idea of divine providence offers comfort. Even when the crops fail or illness takes a loved one, colonists cling to the belief that God's plan extends beyond their understanding. This faith keeps despair at bay and gives meaning to lives that might otherwise feel unbearably harsh. By nightfall, when candles burn low and families gather by the hearth, religion is not put aside but woven into final words of prayer. The fire's glow softens faces, children nod sleepily, and parents whisper thanks for another day endured. Tomorrow will bring more work, more trials, more chances to prove devotion. And though fatigue runs deep, faith runs deeper still. Religion in colonial America is not just belief, it is the compass that directs every step. Sometimes heavy, sometimes comforting, sometimes a source of humor when life grows too grim. It shapes how colonists see themselves, their neighbors, and their God. And whether they whisper prayers with tears or laughter, it is this compass that keeps them moving forward in a world both unforgiving and full of promise. Colonial life is built on hard work, but survival would be nearly impossible without the community. No family can raise barns, harvest fields, or preserve food entirely on their own. And so, the colonists turn labor into social occasions, events that blend necessity with companionship, and sometimes just enough fun to make the endless toil bearable. One of the most iconic gatherings is the barn raising. When a family needs a new barn, men from all around assemble at dawn, tools in hand. There is no question of payment. Everyone knows their own turn will come soon enough. The air fills with the clatter of hammers and the creak of timber being hauled into place. Directions fly: lift here, steady there. Younger men scramble to prove their strength, while older men, less nimble but more experienced, bark instructions. The whole spectacle has the air of a dance. Beams rise, walls slot into place, and before the sun sets, an entire structure stands tall against the sky. At the end of the day, aching backs are soothed with mugs of cider, and there's laughter about who nearly dropped which beam. The barn is not just wood and nails, it is proof that the colony itself holds together. Women have their own gatherings, equally essential and equally social. Quilting bees bring together mothers, daughters, aunts, and neighbors around a large wooden frame stretched with fabric. Fingers move in unison, stitches small and precise. But the real beauty lies in the conversation. Stories traded, worries confessed, jokes shared. A quilt takes shape under their hands, but so does the web of trust and support that binds them. Humor often stitches itself into the day. One woman laughs about her husband's clumsy attempt to mend his own breeches. Another teases that her child's appetite could outpace an army. The laughter rings as bright as the stitches are neat. Corn-husking bees carry their own rhythm. Families gather in a barn filled with towering piles of corn. Men, women, and children sit in circles, stripping husks from ears in a steady, almost hypnotic motion. But husking is never dull when turned into a game. Tradition says that if a young man finds a red ear of corn, he can claim a kiss from the girl beside him. A rule that makes the young giggle nervously and the old wink knowingly. Jokes ripple through the group, hands keep working, and soon barrels of golden kernels are ready for winter storage. What could have been a lonely chore becomes an evening of laughter and, sometimes, a spark of romance. Harvest time itself is perhaps the most important communal event. Neighbors drop their own tasks to help bring in crops before frost or rain can ruin them. Fields that might have taken a family weeks to clear are harvested in days by dozens of hands working side by side. There is urgency, yes, but also joy. The work hums with songs, the wagons creak under heavy loads, and the shared meal afterward tastes better than any feast. A farmer may joke that the cider disappears faster than the corn is gathered, but no one complains too loudly as mugs are refilled. Children weave through these events, turning work into play. They race each other to carry small bundles of wheat, giggle while hiding in corn piles, or pretend that quilt scraps are royal garments. Their antics sometimes slow progress, but their laughter keeps spirits high. Parents may scold, but more often than not, they smile. Because in a world so full of toil, children's joy is its own form of survival. Taverns also play a role in community life, though with a different flavor. By day, they are meeting halls where men discuss politics, trade news, and plan the affairs of the town. By night, they are louder, rowdier, filled with pipes, smoke, fiddles, and arguments that sometimes end in laughter and sometimes in bruises. Tavern humor is earthier than the jokes told at quilting bees, but it serves the same purpose: to remind colonists that survival is easier when spirits are lifted, even if the cider helps a little too much. What's striking about these gatherings is how they blur the line between labor and leisure. Work that might crush an individual becomes lighter when shared. A barn rises not just because men swung hammers, but because neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder. A quilt keeps a child warm not just because stitches were neat, but because women shared burdens and laughter while they sewed. A harvest feeds a family not just because corn was husked, but because friends came together to make the work joyful. And through it all, humor acts as a salve. A man teases his neighbor about dropping a beam, only to be teased later when his own ox wanders off mid-task. A woman brags about her perfect stitches, only for the others to laugh when her thread tangles in her lap. The jokes sting lightly but bond deeply. They say, "We are in this together." By the time stars prick the night sky and the day's work is done, the colony has accomplished more than survival. It has built connection. In barns, kitchens, fields, and taverns, the colonists remind themselves that while hardship is certain, laughter and fellowship are choices, and they choose them again and again. Even in the relentless grind of colonial life, people carve out space for celebration. The seasons dictate much of this rhythm: planting, growing, harvesting, and enduring winter. Between these cycles, communities seize opportunities to gather, feast, and remember that life is not only toil and survival, it is also joy. Festivals in colonial America are simple by modern standards, but to the colonists, they are precious bursts of color in an otherwise gray palette. Harvest festivals are among the most anticipated. After weeks of dawn to dusk labor, neighbors come together to give thanks for what the land has provided. Long tables are laid out in barns or under autumn skies, groaning with roasted meats, stews, fresh bread, dried apples, and of course cider flowing freely. Music fills the air, fiddles, flutes, and drums cobbled together from whatever craftsman can build. Children dart between benches, cheeks flushed from stolen bites of pie, while adults laugh more loudly than usual, their shoulders eased by the knowledge that the fields are finally cleared. The humor at these gatherings is earthy and unpolished. Someone always jokes that the preacher's blessing over the meal lasts longer than the corn harvest itself. Young men brag about who stacked more sheaves, only for an elderly farmer to chuckle and remind them that bragging doesn't fill the barn. And when the cider flows too freely, stories grow taller, oxen turn into mythical beasts, and fish caught in streams seem to double in size with every retelling. Christmas in the colonies is a quieter affair than in later centuries, but it still brings cheer. In Puritan New England, celebrations are subdued. Ministers warn that excessive merriment edges dangerously close to sin. Yet even there, families cannot resist decorating homes with sprigs of evergreen or sharing special foods like spiced cakes or puddings. In the middle and southern colonies, Christmas carries more festivity. Feasts stretch for days, music spills from houses, and small handmade gifts are exchanged. Humor creeps in through playful traditions, children teasing each other with riddles, young men sneaking kisses beneath sprigs of mistletoe, and neighbors ribbing each other about who roasted the driest goose. Spring brings its own kind of celebration, a lighter, brighter joy after the long darkness of winter. Families rejoice at the first green shoots pushing through soil. A simple meal of fresh greens feels like a feast after months of salted meat and dried beans. Communities gather for May festivals, some with old European traditions like maypoles, though always adjusted for colonial practicality. Children dance, ribbons stream, and mothers joke about how the new season brings not only flowers but also mud that seems determined to swallow every shoe. Even funerals, though solemn, contain moments of unexpected levity. Colonial families believe in the dignity of grief, but they also understand that laughter can soften sorrow. After burial, neighbors gather for food and fellowship. Stories of the departed are shared, some serious, others gently humorous. "He could never keep track of his hat," someone recalls, or "She baked bread so tough you could patch a roof with it." The laughter, far from irreverent, honors the memory of those who have passed by celebrating their quirks as much as their virtues. Music plays a central role in every celebration. Fiddlers are prized guests, often plied with food and drink in exchange for tunes that keep feet tapping into the night. Dancers fill cleared barn floors, their stomps rattling beams as fiddles screech and flutes whistle. Some dances are elegant, others more like organized chaos, but the laughter is always loudest when steps go wrong. A man tripping over his own boots becomes the star of the evening, his red face drawing more cheers than mockery. Children, of course, seize every celebration as their stage. They invent games with hoops, stones, and sticks, turning even solemn churchyards into playgrounds once the adults look away. At harvest feasts, they sneak food from tables, their guilty grins giving them away long before the missing pie slice does. Parents scold half-heartedly, secretly pleased to see joy in their children's eyes. Seasonal celebrations serve more than entertainment, they reaffirm bonds. After long winters or exhausting harvests, colonists need reminders that survival is not enough. They need joy, laughter, and music to remind them why they endure. A quilt stitched during winter may warm the body, but a dance shared in spring warms the spirit. A feast fills the stomach, but a joke shared across the table fills the heart. By the time lanterns burn low and fiddles fall silent, colonists return to their homes tired but renewed. Tomorrow will bring more chores, more rocks to clear, more fires to tend. But tonight, their world has been lit with laughter and filled with music, and that memory will carry them through the harsh days ahead. In colonial America, celebrations are not grand spectacles but lifelines. They are proof that even in the hardest of times, people find reasons to smile, to laugh, and to hope. The seasons may dictate labor, but they also gift moments of joy, and in those moments, colonists discover that survival is not merely about work, but about remembering to live. Winter in colonial America is not just a season, it is a gauntlet. When the first sharp bite of frost lingers in the air, families know they must brace themselves. 4 months, the land will be locked in ice, fields buried under snow, and every small task made heavier by cold. Survival depends on the preparations made in autumn, but even the best planning cannot erase the hardships winter brings. Cabins become fortresses against the cold, their log walls chinked with clay and moss, their windows, if there are any at all, covered with oiled paper or thick shutters. Fires are tended constantly, for once the hearth goes out, the chill creeps in with startling speed. Families cluster near flames, their faces flushed with heat while their backs remain cold. Children shuffle like human rotisserie chickens, turning every few minutes to thaw one side before the other freezes. Smoke often refuses to rise properly through chimneys, filling rooms with a haze that stings eyes and coats lungs. More than one colonist grumbles that winter smells like smoke and wet wool. Fetching water becomes an ordeal. Buckets freeze to the ground, ropes stiffen at the well, and surfaces must be smashed with axes before water can be drawn. Children sent on this errand often return with buckets only half full, muttering that most of it sloshed out when they slipped on ice. Mothers scold, fathers shake heads, but everyone knows they too have taken their share of icy tumbles. Humor is the only way to make the memory less painful. Food, carefully preserved in autumn, becomes both salvation and monotony. Salted pork, dried beans, pickled vegetables, and hard bread appear at nearly every meal. Stews simmer endlessly on the hearth, thick with whatever ingredients remain. By February, families joke that if they see another turnip, they might trade it for a snowball just for variety. Apples stored in root cellars shrivel and soften, but they are prized all the same, often reserved for children as sweet rewards. When cider barrels freeze, adults chip away at the ice, laughing that even drink is given up for the season. Clothing layers are essential. Wool stockings pulled over one another, mittens knitted thick, cloaks wrapped tight. Yet despite every effort, the cold sneaks in. Toes numb, fingers stiff, and noses drip in ways no scarf can conceal. Children complain that they cannot move under all the layers, waddling through snow like bundled geese. Parents, suppressing smiles, remind them that staying warm is more important than looking graceful. Still, even adults stumble in snowbanks deep enough to swallow boots, their dignity left behind with every awkward flail. Winter also brings danger. Illness spreads quickly in close quarters. A cough in December may ripple through an entire family by January, leaving everyone weak and weary. Without modern medicine, remedies rely on herbs, honey, and hope. Mothers brew teas from willow bark for fevers, rub mustard poultices on chests for coughs, and offer honey with whiskey to soothe sore throats. Sometimes these work, other times they do not. Families pray fiercely, knowing that even a small sickness can turn fatal when doctors are scarce and treatments questionable. Still, winter nights hold a kind of magic. Families gather around the hearth, the day's work finally stilled by darkness. Stories are told, folk tales from Europe, Bible parables, or exaggerated accounts of local events. Children laugh at stories of trickster animals or brave adventurers, their imaginations warmed even as their feet remain cold. Music fills the air too, fiddles played softly, flutes carved from wood, or simple songs sung in harmony. Humor slips in here as well. Fathers exaggerate tales until mothers roll their eyes, and children giggle at stories where foxes outsmart hunters or neighbors are gently teased in rhyme. Snow itself becomes both enemy and entertainment. Clearing paths is exhausting, but children cannot resist turning drifts into forts. Snowballs fly, laughter echoes, and for a moment the colony feels less like a place of hardship and more like a winter playground. Adults, trudging past with firewood, sometimes catch stray snowballs. Their shouts of mock outrage send children scattering, squealing with glee. Despite the struggles, winter teaches resilience. Families learn to stretch food supplies, to mend clothes until they hold together by will as much as by thread, to tend fires with the vigilance of watchmen. They also learn to laugh at the absurdities. Frozen cider, smoky rooms, children bundled so tightly they topple like logs. Without humor, winter would crush spirits. With it, the cold becomes bearable, even memorable. When spring finally stirs, with birds calling and ice cracking in streams, relief floods every heart. Colonists stagger into the sunlight, pale but alive, joking that they had nearly forgotten what grass looked like. Winter has tested them, and though it left scars, physical and otherwise, it also left stories. Tales of the year the snow was taller than the barn, or the time Uncle John burned his eyebrows trying to coax the fire back to life. Stories that will be retold with laughter long after the frost has melted. In colonial America, winter is the harshest teacher. It strips life to its essentials: warmth, food, companionship, and reminds everyone of their fragility. But it also proves their strength and their ability to find humor even when water freezes in buckets and stew tastes the same for the 100th night in a row. Winter is misery, yes, but also memory, a season that, in its own freezing way, binds the colony together. Colonial America is a land of hard work, but also of constant risk. A cut from an axe, a fever, a difficult childbirth, any of these could tip quickly from inconvenience to disaster. Medicine, such as it exists, is a curious mixture of folk wisdom, religious belief, and what today might be politely called enthusiastic guessing. A doctor is respected, but not always trusted, and many a patient wonders whether the cure might be worse than the illness. The most infamous treatment is bloodletting. Based on the theory of balancing the body's four humors, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, physicians believe that too much blood causes illness. Their solution? Remove some. Doctors carry sharp lancets, carefully slicing veins and letting blood flow into bowls. Sometimes they take pints at a time. Patients often grow weaker, pale, and dizzy. Families whisper, half in jest, that the doctor will drain you dry before the fever does. And yet, desperate for relief, many endure the treatment. Some even claim improvement afterward, though whether from the doctor's skill or sheer stubborn survival is anyone's guess. Purging is another common remedy. Patients are given substances that induce vomiting or severe diarrhea, the idea being that sickness must be expelled from the body. Herbal concoctions, mercurial compounds, or even strong doses of salt water are administered with grim determination. The results are unpleasant at best, dangerous at worst. Joking quietly, some colonists remark that after such medicine, the original ailment feels mild in comparison. Toothaches are the bane of colonial existence. With no dentists as we know them, people turn to barbers, blacksmiths, or anyone willing to wield pliers. The unlucky patient sits in a chair while the tooth is gripped and yanked, sometimes breaking, sometimes leaving shards that fester. Alcohol numbs pain for those who can afford it. For others, prayer and a sturdy friend to hold them down must suffice. Humor softens the agony. Children tease their toothless elders, while adults joke that cider is easier to drink when you have fewer teeth to get in the way. Childbirth is another arena where medicine falters. Midwives, experienced but lacking formal training, rely on tradition and instinct. They know herbs that ease pain and positions that sometimes help difficult births. But infection is a danger no one understands, as tools and cloths are reused without cleaning. Many mothers and infants do not survive. In hushed tones, families accept this as part of God's will, though fathers often pace outside cabins, muttering prayers and promises they cannot keep. Not all remedies are misguided. Willow bark, chewed or brewed as tea, eases pain. It contains a compound similar to aspirin. Honey soothes sore throats and helps heal wounds. Chamomile calms nerves, mint settles stomachs. Colonists discover these benefits by trial and error, passing knowledge through generations. Yet for every effective remedy, there are a dozen useless or dangerous ones. A poultice of bread and milk is applied to infections, sometimes helping, sometimes doing nothing. Powdered toads, ground antlers, or snake skins are prescribed with confidence, if not with results. Superstition lingers alongside medicine. A charm worn around the neck might be believed to ward off fevers. A prayer whispered over herbs is thought to increase their power. Ministers preach that illness can be punishment for sin, while neighbors whisper that perhaps a curse is to blame. In a world where explanations are scarce, people grasp at any thread that promises hope. Communities share both remedies and humor about them. Neighbors swap recipes for teas and poultices, shaking heads over the more extreme suggestions. If I must chew on another root, one farmer jokes, I'll sprout leaves myself. Another swears that cider, taken daily and liberally, prevents all ailments, though his rosy cheeks suggest his prescription is more indulgence than cure. The few trained doctors in the colonies often inspire as much fear as confidence. They carry leather bags filled with mysterious instruments, saws, forceps, lancets, that look more suited to carpentry than healing. Patients eye these tools nervously, muttering that if the illness doesn't kill them, the cure might. Yet when illness grows dire, families summon the doctor anyway because in truth, any chance is better than none. Despite the suffering, colonists show remarkable resilience. They survive broken bones splinted with rough boards, fevers endured with cold cloths, and infections treated with little more than determination. Death is frequent, but so is recovery. Each scar tells a story: the boy who lived after a fall from a horse, the mother who survived childbirth against all odds, the soldier who walked again after a musket wound. These stories become proof that the human spirit is tougher than any illness, or any doctor's lancet. Medicine in colonial America may be crude, but it reveals the blend of desperation, ingenuity, and humor that defines the people themselves. They endure treatments that today seem absurd, they cling to remedies that sometimes work, and they laugh where they can, because laughter itself may be the best medicine they truly possess. If colonial America has a universal complaint, it is about teeth. By middle age, many colonists are half-toothless, chewing carefully and smiling with a closed mouth. Dental care as a formal profession does not exist. Pain is endured until it becomes unbearable, and then the only solution is extraction. It is a brutal business. Tooth pulling is often done by whoever has the strongest grip in the right tool. A barber might oblige between shaves, a blacksmith between horseshoes. The patient sits in a chair, or sometimes just a sturdy stool, while the extractor grips the offending tooth with iron pliers or a hooked instrument. There is no anesthesia beyond strong cider or perhaps a splash of rum. Screams echo, teeth crack, and sometimes the entire jaw suffers for one rotten molar. Families joke afterward that at least the tooth won't bother them again, though the grimace suggests the cure feels worse than the ache. False teeth exist, but they are reserved for the wealthy. George Washington famously suffered from dental misery his entire life, wearing dentures made from ivory, metal, and even human teeth. They were uncomfortable, often grotesque, and made his face appear stiff. For the average colonist, such contraptions are unthinkable luxuries. Most simply adapt to softer foods, soaking hard bread in cider until it yields. Children laugh at their elders gumming their meals, though the humor hides the knowledge that their own teeth will one day follow the same path. Everyday aches are just as relentless. Backs stoop from hours bent over fields or looms. Hands callous and crack. Joints swell with arthritis long before gray hair appears. Without modern medicine, there is no relief beyond rest, herbs, or sheer stubbornness. Colonists grow used to discomfort, accepting it as the price of survival. Jokes soften the blow. If my back aches now, it must mean I've earned tomorrow's bread already. Or, this knee creaks louder than the barn door, but at least both still open. Injuries are frequent and often permanent. A slip with an axe leaves a hand scarred. A fall from a horse breaks bones that never set straight. Children learn quickly that pain is part of life. A scraped knee receives no sympathy. Instead, parents remind them that scratches build toughness. Tears dry fast when chores still wait. Humor sneaks in even here. A boy limps dramatically after stepping on a splinter, only to be teased by siblings that the splinter is bigger than he is. Headaches, stomachaches, fevers, these are treated with homemade remedies. Mint tea for stomach pains, willow bark for headaches, poultices of herbs for sore joints. Whether they truly work or simply distract the patient is debatable. Families cling to them all the same because doing something feels better than doing nothing. And if the remedies fail, humor often serves as the last resort. If I drink any more willow bark, one colonist grumbles, I'll sprout branches come spring. Fatigue is constant. 16-hour days leave bodies drained, and yet there is no rest. Chores repeat endlessly. Farmers joke that their cows rise earlier than the rooster just to spite them. Women tease that spinning wheels hum in their dreams. Children laugh that hauling water must be punishment for sins they don't remember committing. Laughter does not erase exhaustion, but it makes it easier to face the next day. One of the cruelest realities is infection. A small cut can fester, swelling into a wound that kills. Broken skin, especially in winter when hands crack, becomes a gateway for sickness. Colonists treat wounds with honey, vinegar, or spirits, hoping to ward off decay. When the remedies fail, families whisper prayers and brace for the worst. Yet even here, humor creeps in, gallows humor perhaps, but humor nonetheless. "If I lose this finger," a man mutters after slicing it with a saw, "at least I'll have one less to freeze in winter." The resilience of colonists lies not in avoiding pain but in enduring it. They accept that teeth will rot, that backs will ache, that joints will stiffen. What amazes is not their suffering, but their ability to keep moving, to keep laughing even as they chew on softened bread or stretch aching limbs at dawn. Their jokes, rough, simple, sometimes wry, become as important as any remedy. In colonial America, smiles may be toothless, backs bent, and hands scarred. But each scar is a story, each missing tooth a reminder of survival. They joke because the alternative is despair, and in their laughter, they discover a kind of medicine stronger than any lancet or poultice: the ability to endure. In colonial America, childbirth is one of the most dangerous passages a woman can face. Without modern medicine, anesthesia, or understanding of germs, every birth is a gamble. Mothers know this with heavy certainty. They have seen neighbors buried too young, infants lost before they could be named. Yet despite the risk, life depends on it. Families are large not out of choice but necessity. Children are both a blessing and a workforce, and survival of the household often hinges on numbers. Midwives preside over most births. Experienced but untrained in formal medicine, they rely on tradition, observation, and the accumulated wisdom of countless deliveries. They know which herbs might ease pain, which positions sometimes help, and how to steady a frightened mother with words and presence. Their bags carry simple tools: cloths, scissors, herbs, maybe a bottle of spirits for courage. They do not wear white coats, but their reputations carry weight. Everyone knows which midwife is patient, which is sharp-tongued, which prays louder than she delivers instructions. For the laboring woman, hours stretch into agony. No sterile rooms, no clean sheets, just a corner of a cabin or a small chamber filled with female relatives, neighbors, and the midwife. The air is hot with firelight, sweat, and the tension of waiting. Moans and cries echo through walls, while outside, husbands pace in helpless circles. Men are rarely allowed into the birthing room, and perhaps that is for the best. More than one father has fainted at the sound of his wife's screams, earning a reputation that lingers long after the child's birth. Complications are frequent. Prolonged labor, breech births, hemorrhage, any one of these can prove fatal. Midwives do what they can, calling on experience and faith. Some attempt prayers, others rely on brute persistence. Occasionally, a doctor is summoned, though many families hesitate, fearing his saws and lancets more than they trust his skills. And often there is little he can do. The phrase "God's will" becomes both comfort and explanation when medicine fails. Infant mortality is heartbreakingly high. Many babies die within days, victims of infection or weakness. Parents sometimes delay naming a child until it survives the first weeks, as if to protect their hearts from grief. Cemeteries tell the tale in rows of tiny headstones. Yet even amid sorrow, humor finds its place. Mothers joke quietly that the child who cries the loudest at birth will surely be the strongest, and fathers tease that a baby with lungs that powerful must already be destined to lead sermons. When births go well, the relief is immense. A healthy child, a surviving mother, these are victories celebrated with tears, prayers, and sometimes cider raised in quiet toasts. Women laugh afterward about their husbands' pale faces or the midwife's scolding, finding humor to soften the memory of pain. A new mother, exhausted but triumphant, cradles her infant and jokes that after such an ordeal, the child had better grow up to fetch water without complaint. The physical toll on women is immense. Many bear child after child, their bodies weary long before their years. They walk with bent backs, their hands rough from work and their health fragile from repeated births. Yet they persist because children are the lifeblood of the colony. Sons will help in fields, daughters in kitchens. Every child is both another mouth to feed and another pair of hands to labor. Families balance this contradiction with pragmatism and faith. Midwives too carry their burdens. They are present at both miracles and tragedies, praised when births succeed, blamed when they fail. They absorb the fears of mothers and the suspicions of fathers, standing in the middle of life and death. Their humor is often sharp, born from necessity. If men birth babies, one midwife quips, we'd run out of them in a generation. The women laugh because the truth in the joke makes it all the more powerful. For the community, each birth is more than a private event. It is survival itself. A new child means another link in the fragile chain of life, another future farmer, weaver, or blacksmith. The cries of an infant reassure neighbors that the colony endures. And though sorrow is common, joy is just as fierce when life triumphs. By nightfall, when the baby is finally asleep and the mother drifts into exhausted rest, the household feels transformed. The danger has passed for now. Tomorrow brings more chores, more labor, more risks. But tonight, in the soft glow of firelight, there is a miracle, life where there was none. Childbirth in colonial America is perilous, painful, and often tragic. But it is also proof of resilience. Women face it with courage, midwives with determination, husbands with helpless pacing, and communities with watchful hope. And when humor slips in, about fainting fathers, noisy infants, or stubborn midwives, it becomes not disrespect, but a way of enduring. In laughter, even at the edge of danger, colonists remind themselves that survival is not just about living, but about living with spirit. In colonial America, death is never far away. Illness, accidents, childbirth, and war claim lives regularly, so much so that families grow up with grief as a constant companion. Yet even in the face of sorrow, communities find ways to honor the dead, comfort the living, and, on occasion, bring a touch of wry humor to soften the weight of loss. Cemeteries are stark reminders of mortality. In New England villages, they sit beside churches, their headstones carved with winged skulls, grim reminders that death spares no one. In southern plantations, family plots lie shaded under trees, the earth freshly turned more often than anyone would like to admit. Tiny graves for infants and children are heartbreakingly common. Parents sometimes wait weeks before naming a newborn, wary of binding their hearts too tightly to a life that may not last. For modern eyes, this seems cold, but for colonists, it is survival of spirit. Funerals themselves are community events. When death strikes, neighbors gather to dig graves by hand, their shovels biting into hard earth in winter or muddy ground in spring. Pallbearers carry plain wooden coffins, often crafted hastily by local carpenters. Wealthy families may afford elaborate boxes with brass handles, but most settle for simple pine. Ministers deliver sermons heavy with reminders of sin and salvation, their words echoing across bowed heads. Attendees murmur prayers, sing hymns, and shed tears openly. Yet funerals are not purely solemn. After the burial, mourners gather in homes for food and fellowship. Tables groan with bread, cider, and roasted meat. Conversation turns to stories of the departed, some serious, some affectionate, and some quietly humorous. He could never keep his boots clean even on a dry day, one man recalls, and laughter bubbles through the room. Her bread could chip a tooth, but no one ever left her table hungry, another adds, and heads nod with smiles. These small jokes are not disrespect. They are tributes, ways of remembering a person's quirks alongside their virtues. Mourning customs vary. In wealthier families, widows may wear black for months, their gowns dyed with expensive imported cloth. Poorer families mark loss more simply, perhaps with a strip of black ribbon or a homemade cap. Women are expected to show grief openly, while men often mask it with stoic silence. Yet even the sternest father cannot fully hide the crack in his voice when he speaks of a lost child. Children learn about death early, sometimes earlier than they learn their letters. They attend funerals, hear sermons about mortality, and walk past rows of tiny gravestones. They play games among headstones when adults aren't looking, daring each other to run between them after dark. Parents scold, but secretly they understand. Children process sorrow the only way they can, by folding it into play, laughter mixing with shadows. Superstition seeps into burial customs as well. Some families place shoes, coins, or personal items in coffins to guard the dead on their journey. Others believe in signs, a bird flying into a house, a candle guttering unexpectedly, or a dream of an empty chair. Ministers frown on such beliefs, preaching reliance on God alone. Yet old habits die hard, and colonists quietly hedge their bets, adding charms and prayers just in case. Death also carries practical consequences. Widows must decide how to manage farms or remarry quickly for survival. Orphans are often taken in by relatives or neighbors, folded into new households as extra hands. In tight-knit communities, loss is not born alone. Neighbors bring food, help with chores, and watch over children. Grief may be private, but mourning is shared. Humor, though subdued, plays its part. A man mutters at his own funeral preparations, "Don't waste the good cider on me, I won't taste it." His family, retelling the story, laughs through tears. A neighbor grumbles that funerals are the only time everyone shows up on time, prompting chuckles even in the churchyard. These remarks lighten sorrow, reminding colonists that death may take bodies but cannot silence voices or erase memories. In the end, colonial death is not hidden away but woven into daily life. Families pass cemeteries on their way to church, children hear sermons on mortality every Sunday, and every household knows the sting of loss. Yet from this constant presence grows resilience. Death is accepted, mourned, and, when possible, laughed at gently because laughter makes grief bearable. As evening falls after a funeral, candles flicker in windows, families gather quietly, and stories of the departed continue long into the night. Tears mingle with smiles, hymns with jokes, sorrow with gratitude. In colonial America, death is not the end of community, it is another way it binds itself together. If the church is the heart of colonial piety, then the tavern is the soul of its laughter. Step into one on a bustling evening, and you are immediately swallowed by noise, laughter spilling like cider, fiddles squealing out tunes, the scrape of chairs, and the rumble of gossip. Taverns are more than drinking houses. They are community centers, political stages, newsrooms, and sometimes the only escape from endless chores. Inside, the air is thick with pipe smoke, roasting meat, and the sour tang of ale. Wooden tables are scarred by countless mugs thumped down in emphasis. Rum is king, imported from the Caribbean by the barrel and flowing freely. Cider holds its own, and beer, often weak enough to serve children, is poured without pause. Stronger spirits, whiskey or brandy, appear when tongues are loose and coin purses are open. Men gather here after long days in fields or workshops, shaking off the weight of work. Farmers argue about crops, blacksmiths boast of shoeing the most horses, and merchants grumble about taxes. Politics simmers in the background. British laws, local disputes, and rumors of revolution are chewed over with as much energy as the roasted pork. Heated arguments are common, but so are hearty laughs that smooth over tempers before fists fly. The tavern keeper is part host, part referee. With a sharp eye and quicker wit, he manages drinkers who grow too rowdy. "If you want to fight," he quips, "take it outside where my tables won't pay the price." Women, too, sometimes run taverns, especially widows who inherit the business. They are sharp-tongued, practical, and feared in equal measure by customers who know better than to test their patience. Games break out at tables. Dice clattering, cards slapped down, coins exchanged with groans or cheers. Some men swear the dice are cursed. Others insist their luck will change with the next throw. Losers claim the tavern is too dim to see their cards properly, earning smirks from winners who suggest perhaps the rum was brighter than the candles. Stories fly as easily as drinks. A farmer insists he saw a wolf larger than a horse, its eyes glowing red. A sailor brags of storms so fierce they nearly tossed him into the Atlantic. Listeners nod, half believing, half laughing, adding their own embellishments. Exaggeration is part of the game, and the bigger the tale, the better the applause. By night's end, a stray dog chasing chickens might have grown into a bear that terrorized half the county. Humor thrives in taverns. Colonists tease each other mercilessly. A man who trips over his own boots is reminded of it for weeks. A neighbor who once mistook a cow for a bear at dusk becomes the butt of every hunting story. Even ministers, when absent, find themselves impersonated by merry drinkers, their sermons shortened and voices exaggerated to roars of laughter. These jokes are not cruel, they are the glue that binds communities, a way of softening the edges of hard lives. Music fills gaps between chatter. A fiddler plays jigs that set feet tapping, while someone pounds rhythms on a table with a spoon. Dancing breaks out, boots thudding on wooden floors. Couples whirl, skirts swish, and even the most stoic farmer may be coaxed into a clumsy reel. Children peer in from outside, giggling as their elders stumble and spin. Not all tavern moments are merry. Debts are discussed, contracts signed, and sometimes brawls break out when pride outpaces patience. But even fights often end in laughter once bruises fade. "He knocked me down," a man admits sheepishly, but only because the floor rushed up too quickly. The tavern keeper shakes his head, pours another drink, and life goes on. What makes taverns remarkable is their inclusiveness. Here, distinctions of class blur. Wealthy merchants and humble farmers share the same mugs and benches. Rum loosens tongues that otherwise might stay silent across social divides. A shoemaker debates politics with a lawyer, a sailor swaps tales with a landowner, and for a few hours, everyone is simply colonial, laughing at the same jokes and singing the same songs. As candles burn low and mugs empty, the tavern quiets. Men stumble into the night, boots crunching on cobblestones, voices still raised in laughter or song. Some will face scolding wives, others will fall asleep in barns, but all will remember the warmth of fellowship that cuts through the chill of colonial hardship. The tavern is more than a place to drink. It is where humor blossoms, where bonds strengthen, and where weary colonists remind themselves that life, though difficult, is also worth celebrating. In its smoky rooms, amid spilled cider and crooked dice, the colonial spirit finds release, not in solemn sermons or endless labor, but in laughter that echoes long after the candles die. By the mid-1700s, colonial life is a strange mixture of hardship and hope. Families have endured winters that froze cider into ice, childbirth that teetered between life and death, and endless chores that left backs bent and hands scarred. Yet these same people have also built communities, laughed in smoky taverns, shared quilts stitched by many hands, and told stories by firelight. They have learned resilience not in theory but in practice, day after exhausting day. And now, all of that resilience is about to be tested in a new way. Whispers of revolution begin not in great halls, but in ordinary places. Churchyards after sermons, taverns thick with smoke, and village greens where militia drill awkwardly at first. Taxes imposed by Britain, on tea, on paper, on molasses, are more than inconveniences. To colonists who scrape by with salted pork and turnip stew, every penny matters. They joke bitterly that King George must want their last candle stub too. When merchants are told they must buy overpriced goods from England instead of crafting their own, blacksmiths mutter that the king should come hammer his own nails if he wants them so badly. The Boston Tea Party is not just an act of rebellion. It is a declaration by ordinary men, farmers, dockworkers, shopkeepers, that they will not be squeezed any further. Dumping chests of tea into the harbor, they laugh that fish will finally get a taste of luxury. British officials are not amused. Punishments follow swiftly. Harbors closed, rights revoked, soldiers quartered in colonial homes. But instead of cowing the people, these measures harden their resolve. If they can survive icy winters, rotten teeth, and stew made of turnips for the 100th night, they can survive British crackdowns too. Women take up new roles with determination. They boycott imported tea, spinning their own thread and weaving cloth rather than buying British textiles. They form spinning bees, where gossip, laughter, and whirring wheels blend into small acts of defiance. Some tease that their husbands will now have to wear uneven stockings, but at least they'll be free stockings. Humor keeps spirits alive even as sacrifices mount. Militia men, the so-called Minutemen, gather on village greens with muskets slung over shoulders. They drill unevenly, some firing too early, others fumbling with powder, but determination counts more than precision. Boys watch wide-eyed, imagining glory, while mothers shake heads, muttering that their husbands can barely hit a turkey, let alone a redcoat. Yet pride swells in the air. For the first time, colonists begin to see themselves not as subjects, but as something new, Americans. Taverns buzz with debate. One man argues for loyalty to the crown, another insists freedom is worth any price. Voices rise, mugs slam, and for a tense moment it seems fists will fly. Then someone cracks a joke about the king's wig costing more than an entire farm, and the room erupts in laughter, easing tempers. Even in politics, colonists lean on humor as a shield against despair. The strength of the colonies does not lie in wealth or weapons. It lies in the skills and toughness forged by daily life. A farmer who can coax crops from rocky soil can endure a soldier's camp. A woman who has survived 12 births, 6 losses, and still laughs at the stubbornness of her husband can keep a family alive through war. A blacksmith who swings hammers in heat all day can swing a musket in battle. Their survival has been their training. Their humor, their secret weapon. As tensions rise toward war, colonists face an uncertain future. Some fear the costs, lives lost, homes destroyed, communities torn apart. Others burn with hope, convinced that freedom is worth the risk. Around firesides, families talk late into the night. Fathers remind sons that independence means toil, not ease. Mothers remind daughters that sacrifice is the price of dignity. Children listen, half understanding but sensing the gravity in the air. When revolution finally ignites, it is not just soldiers who march, but entire communities who bear the weight. Women keep farms running, men take up arms, children carry messages. Losses are heavy, victories uncertain. Yet through it all, colonists draw on the same grit that has carried them through winters, sickness, and sorrow. They laugh when they can, curse when they must, and press on regardless. By the time independence is declared, something extraordinary has already happened. Colonists, once divided by class, region, and circumstance, have discovered a shared identity born of hardship and bound by humor. They have learned that ordinary people, scarred hands and toothless grins included, can shape extraordinary destinies. The seeds of revolution were planted in fields full of stumps, in smoky taverns, in spinning rooms, and in laughter that refused to be silenced. From those seeds grows a new nation, built not on ease but on endurance, not on luxury but on resilience, not on solemnity alone, but also on the ability to laugh in the face of hardship. And so, as another colonial night settles in, fires burning low and stories whispered in the dark, the people of America rest with one certainty. Tomorrow will bring more toil, perhaps more sorrow, but also more opportunity. And when it does, they will face it as they always have, together, with grit, with humor, and with the unshakable belief that ordinary people can change the world.